right, all right. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody.
Afternoon.
It's good to see you guys.
Yes, sir. Good to see you, man. Good to see you. We still working out the bugs here at the church, man.
Yes. I see that. I see. But we're a little earlier this week than we were last week, so that's a plus.
That's a win. That's a major win.
That's a win. Look, man, I know we've got a lot to hook into today. We are back in season 5. We are excited to have those of you that are joining us today here with us. We hope that you had a good time with us on last week, because last week we actually began season number 5. All right. But right here at the beginning, there's something that we need everybody to do right about now. Dr. Henry, what is that, sir?
Well, listen, man, we want to share, man. This is going to be an awesome program today. So you just want to continue to share this thing with all your friends. Just share.
All right. And Pastor Wade, what else do we want folk to do today as far as what we've got going on here at the Pastors Roundtable?
Hey, at Pastors Roundtable, we need you to like, subscribe, and share. So we talked about the sharing, but we need you to like and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're on Facebook, please share. Please like. And today we are actually streaming directly to the South Central Conference YouTube and Facebook page. So we're just excited to finally begin to harness the power of technology for all of our platforms, all of our conferences that have had an impeccable impact on Pastors Roundtable. So we welcome the South Central Conference family again.
Wow, and that's amazing, because we're also streaming today to the Southeastern website, but their Facebook page and YouTube channel. So we want to welcome all of you that are joining us via SEC TV. Thank you for joining us here at the Pastors Roundtable today. So we all we got left, Dr. Henry, is Florida Conference.
Yeah, hey. We will be coming, man.
All right.
Good stuff. Well, listen, if you missed last week, you missed a wonderful discussion that we had. Guys, tell if people missed last week, what did they miss?
Wow. We had a conversation on evangelism in the cities, particularly. And we've got the big picture. And we inspired the church, the local church leaders, to get involved, to make an impact where they are, because that's where it begins, at the local church.
Good. Dion, any takeaways from last week?
Listen, last week, man, my takeaway is evangelism still works, and more specifically, public evangelism. I'm talking about the nightly meetings. It still works. And I think that was really emphasized last week, that this is what we have to do on top of the other things that we're doing in evangelism to get this word out that Jesus is coming soon.
Awesome. And we're excited today. This is a first that we have ever done. We actually have a guest that is a return guest back to back. So we are excited to have a return guest with us today. If you saw the flyer, then you already know who that guest is. But Dr. Wade, just in case somebody did not see the flyer for today, tell us who is our guest today, Doc.
Well, listen, I am just peacock proud to have our guest. Anytime I'm able to sit at his feet and learn, I am excited. He was very instrumental, if I may say, in providing an opportunity for me to get into the ministry and to be shaped in ministry to do what we are doing even now. I owe it all to our senior. He was my senior pastor. Always will be my senior pastor, Dr. Ron Smith, who is the president of the Southern Union, and he is at this very moment sharing with my colleague, Dr. Henry, And so it's a joy to know that he's willing to come and be a part of the Pastors Roundtable once again.
All right. Awesome. Awesome. Well, listen, we're going to bring him on because we want to hop right into this discussion today. We haven't told you what the discussion is about yet, but we're going to do that in just a minute here. Dr. Smith, welcome back to the Pastors Roundtable. You are the first, sir. You have broken a barrier in the back-to-back, week-to-week guest catalog for us here at the Pastors Roundtable, and we are so excited and honored that you would be the one to do that. Dr. Henry, just before we invite Dr. Smith to greet the audience, let's tell everybody what we are talking about today.
Well, listen, today's topic is hot. As you know, last year, we were still in this COVID thing. We're still in the COVID now, but a lot of the constituency meetings and sessions were put off. Well, this is the year we are on a constituency session marathon. So we want to talk about constituency sessions, man. We're on a blitz, right? We want to talk about what is it? What is it good for? What do the members or the delegates need to know when they attend one of these things? And we happen to have somebody on right now that's very familiar with constituency meetings, as Pastor Wade introduced him. I do want to say that this year he has about 8 constituency sessions to tend to. So this is going to be a really, really good program. And again, what a privilege to have Dr. Ron Smith with us. And also, I just want to say it's a privilege to have him here at Altamont Springs with me for these last couple of weeks. And so I really feel privileged today.
I don't know what I need to do to be like Dr. Henry when I grow up, Dr. Smith, to be able to have you back to back with him. I don't know what he paid you. I don't know what he's feeding you. I don't know. You got to teach me the trick of how to make that happen.
I believe that you possess all of the trappings and the overarchings and the underpinnings in your character and presentation. Dr. Henry indeed is a statesman. He's a kind-hearted gentleman. He's a Christian. And he's the consummate host for anyone who darts his door. And I happen to know about you, Pastor Paul. You are indeed a warm host and consummate preacher and leader and organizer. And Pastor Wade, I also know you as the same. So I think I am privileged today to be sitting with a dream team. This is This is actually my third opportunity to sit at the round table with you. I think on one occasion we participated along with my able colleague, Pastor Roger Hernandez.
That's right.
We worked through a situation and conversation surrounding reconnecting with missing members.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
That's right.
Conversation. And on last week, I just had the privilege of joining you along with another special guest who is also here with Dr. Dion, and that is Pastor Calvin Watkins from the North American Division, as one of our vice presidents, who also engaged in the conversation surrounding evangelism to the cities, public evangelism. And today, I'm very honored to participate in the direction that you all will facilitate as it relates to constituency meetings and the purpose of them and what needs to be known about them and how efficacious are they, if I understand the point correctly, and what is the church better off because of them? Can they be filed and addressed and made or customized to meet some of the needs and the expectations of constituents from place to place? I believe that's the nature of the conversation today, and I'm so very honored just to be a part of this initiative. By the way, I just want you to know I'm a fan of the round table. What you all are doing, I just believe it. So, I like your slogan, about its relevance and it being real and it being resourced. I mean, that's awesome. And that's kind of what we as preachers need. And you all are scratching where it itches as far as I'm concerned. I just pray that I know that you all are saying that this needs to be liked and affirmed and communicated in diverse places. Well, I believe that's going to be organic. That's going to happen anyway because of the quality of what you gentlemen have done and are doing with the round table. Congratulations on the 5th season, and thank you for letting me be a part today.
Wow.
Praise God. Awesome.
Roger, he said this is his
Yeah.
third time. This is his third time. We need to get him a T-shirt,
That's
a
right.
mug, a cap, a pen, or something. He said,
It's coming. It's coming. It's coming.
yeah.
It's coming. As he says, it's got to be organic. So we're making sure that the organicness of it is going to grow correctly and be done right. So we wanted to make sure that is coming in soon. So we praise God for
Absolutely.
that.
Listen, before we go too further too, Raj, we got to shout out some of our folk that we see. We didn't do that yet. I see Cassandra Hudson joining us. I think she's on the left coast out there in
Mhm.
California time. Good to
That's
see
right.
her. I see
We
Jennifer.
have Monique Francois, I think it's her name, joining us from London,
From
UK.
London, UK. All right. All right.
Yes.
Good, good. Glad to have you, Stephanie Scott, our South Central friend there.
Yes.
Works in the, what's that, the not PR, HR.
She's HR. She's our
Yeah.
HR superstar, I like to call her. And
Okay.
I have to give her a shout out. She's one of our number one fan. My mother, Shaki Patrick. And so
Yes.
she's on. She called me just before we started. She wanted to make sure she was there and on time. Make sure I sent her the link. So I had to make sure to do that before. So she made it on. So we're excited for her as she prepares. She's actually in Atlanta and preparing to head back to Trinidad. So
Oh, wow.
we'll be hearing
Okay.
some more of that very soon.
All right. Listen, I see a text here, and we talked about Dr. Smith being with us on our third time. We got some very sad news over the past couple of weeks. We heard that one of our previous guests, Miss Sarah Sultan, that she passed this week. And I know much of our audience, you know her. She was a leader leading out with the Adventist Musicians Network. And we just want to let all of her friends and family know that on the behalf of the Pastors Roundtable, that we are lifting you up. We are praying for you.
Yes.
She was a wonderful, wonderful individual, and that we're lifting her and her family up as they walk through this part of the journey.
Yes, yes. We also listen. I want Dr. Smith. You have a fan, Doreen Priscilla Brown. She wanted to let us know that she is so excited that you are here with us, and she's looking forward to hearing what you have to say on this particular topic. But she sends her greetings for you there through our chat.
Yeah. Hey, and listen, I guess we need to make one more, this season that we're in when it comes to death and dying, it has touched all of our families in the PRT family again. Another one of our previous guests and personal friend to many of us here, Dr. Carlton Bird, lost his father a couple of weeks ago, and that funeral is going to be on tomorrow. And we know most of our audience is very familiar with that family. And we just want that family to know as well that we are lifting them up as they walk through this journey. All right, gentlemen, let's have a word of prayer and then let's hop in. Let's hop into our discussion today. Dr. Henry, would you give us a word, please, sir? All right, Dr. Wade, I'm sorry, Pastor Wade. Dr. Henry's.
Let's pray. Father, again, thank you for your love, your mercy, and your grace. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for this space. Lead us and guide us in this conversation is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. All right. Here we go. So, Dr. Smith, when we talk about constituency sessions, could you just give us, just right off the top, just a kind of definition of what a constituency session is and how it impacts the various levels of the Seventh-day Adventist Church? There are probably some of our listeners who've never heard of a constituency session. They go to church on the weekends and they go home and that's it. So when they hear constituency session delegates, just give us an overview, if you would, of what a constituency session is designed to accomplish and how it impacts the various levels of church organization.
Certainly. I do want to say when we think in terms of a constituency session, think in terms of any organization in the world, any company. There's what they call a membership. And when we have to come together to share data, to share reports, to make sure we refresh whatever leadership is in place, we call them membership meetings. For example, if it's a health system, we call it a membership meeting. If it's a university, we call it a membership meeting. Well, for all practical purposes, the members of the Seventh day Adventist Church at varied levels. And I probably, if you would just permit me, just to kind of give a little anatomy of how our church is configured without consuming too much time, I'd
Okay.
like to mention the fact that we are made up of different pieces. We're all the same, but there are segments of our organization that somewhat predispose how the church works. For example, when we think in terms of our local churches are absolutely necessary. We have some latitudes as local churches. We operate church schools. We operate and facilitate worship services, gymnasiums, community outreach, and all types of ministries and food pantries and that type of thing that we could do to sort of engage our members in the community. Then we think about the conference organization, which pretty much operates stuff that the local church cannot operate, such as campgrounds and retreat centers and academies and rotating pastors. Okay, a local church cannot rotate pastors around a conference territory. Coordinating evangelism in terms of a trajectory that we talked about last week within a conference, and then we have gatherings, large gatherings like camp meetings and trust services, and then we think in terms of the union. Okay, union operates colleges and universities. Of course, a conference cannot operate a college. A conference can't operate a university, but a union can. And different departmental ministries in a global way. Then there's something called the revolving fund. When
Okay.
churches and conferences need money in order to build and to expand and to develop, obviously there is a fund that all of us pay into, and obviously we have to operate by the same rules as a bank. There are underwriters and that type of thing to make sure that the fund stays healthy. Uh, we operate a periodical, a union-wide organ called the Southern Tidings, for example, in the Southern Union, and internet technologies in a more global way and more globalized evangelism. So the union has a function, and when we think in terms of the Southern Union, we are a union of conferences. That's what we're really talking about. For example, in this union, and I know there are people who tap into the roundtable who might not be a part of the Southern Union, but for the purpose of um, roundtable, which is resident in the Southern Union. I can just mention the Carolina Conference as one of our conferences. I can mention Florida Conference as one of our conferences, as Georgia Cumberland being one, Gulf States, Kentucky, Tennessee. And then we have three regional conferences in the context of the Southern Union, the South Atlantic Conference and the South Central Conference and the Southeastern Conference. And then we think about divisions. Okay, divisions operate wide media ministry type things. We have some legacy ministries like Breath of Life. A union can operate that. The division has to do that.
Okay.
Legacy like Jesus 101 and Breath of Life and It Is Written. And then we have the Theological Seminary, which is operated by a division, the North American division, or another division around the world. Retirement plan. Okay, basically, there is a regional conference retirement plan, but most of our conferences in the division are still on the North American division
Hmm.
retirement plan. We also operate what we call publishing houses. Okay, a conference or a union can operate a publishing house, but a division can. And then, of course, we have the general conference. The general conference. Well, let me just say, within the North American division, we have different unions. We have the Atlantic Union, we have the Church in Canada, we have the Columbia Union, we have the Lake Union, the Mid America Union, the North Pacific Union, the Pacific Union. We also have couched in there the largest union that we have in North America and the most financially endowed union in the entire world, and it's called the Southern Union, where you gentlemen
Well,
live. And then we have the Southwestern Union. All of that makes up what we understand to be the North American division. And then we have the General Conference of Seventh. So we operate missionaries around the world, global evangelism, Adventist World Radio, ADRA, Adventist Development and Relief Agency, and Adventist Television Network, like the Hope Channel, not 3ABN. That's sort of an independent ministry, but the Hope Channel, the Sabbath School Quarterly, that we read, the Sabbath School Quarterly that we use for our Sabbath School classes. There's a curriculum by the Education Department for mission within the General Conference. And then there's an organ that we swirl around the world called the Adventist Review. Now, with that being said, you asked a question surrounding constituency meetings and what they're for, and they're basically to keep the membership informed. Okay, we have a tendency to try and target and pin a constituency session as being purposed only for electing officers. So then it gets very disheartening because some of us feel that because of the high level politicism that exists pretty much on every frontier, not just in the church. Think about the United States of America when there's a presidential election or a senatorial election. There's just a whole lot of gravitas in terms of people's feelings and people's ideologies and people jockeying and lobbying and pushing for placement in terms of getting their ideology on the frontier. Well, it's no different in the church. But that's not all that a session does. There's only one piece of a session. Probably I consider the most significant segment of a session to be reports that basically speak to the progress of our mission as a Seventh-day Adventist church. And I think that's probably the highlight, what should be the highlight of a session. Somehow that
it's not.
Yeah. Now,
it's not.
by the election process.
Yes.
But I guess what I'm trying to say, sessions are designed for more than the election process. Sessions are designed for us to gain clarity surrounding our balance sheet, our financial position, surrounding the integrity of the utilization of money. It's called an audit. And, all of these elements have become critical when you operate not just a conference, but any business. Mm-hmm. We have membership meetings. We have to show strategy opportunities. And then the other advantage of a constituency session is to showcase forward thinking. Okay, what is our strategy for getting to the next base? What is our plan to take this city, to take this country for Jesus, to take our jurisdiction for Jesus? What is our MO? How coordinated are we? How do we get the word around that we have a strategic plan for going forward? So I just want to say, I know that sessions have been dominated by the election process in terms of our anticipation. I mean, I come from a conference, it remains nameless except those who might know, like Wajue. I come from a conference where it's called a regional conference, and basically, I won't say what hemisphere of the United States is found in, because I'll leave that to your active imaginations. But when we go to conference sessions, and we get there at 8 a.m. for devotion in the morning, and usually we have a fiery preacher. When Brad was alive, we can anticipate, him getting one of his strongest guns, and he'll stand up and he'll say, "And the dragon was wroth with the woman." Okay, and we get all fired up, and basically he exhorts us to be kind and don't put away our Uzis and our Scud missiles, or put those things away, and let's focus on what God is getting ready to do. That's usually around 8 o'clock. And then as I'm one of those peanut gallery guys, so I like sitting in the back and kind of observing some of the dynamics of the group and the crowd. And I'm noticing people are driving up and their trunks are laden down with potato salad and fried chicken and macaroni and cheese and collard greens, like they plan to stay for a very long time.
I thought you were going to say that their trunks were laden down with Uzis and Scud missiles.
Oh, man. Those too. Imagine those are maybe on the side, but those are more concealed. But I'm saying the coolers have all kinds of stuff in there. And then they got roti, passed away from Trinidad, and they got ginger beer, and they got all kinds of good stuff that basically we can just snack on and enjoy ourselves and refresh ourselves. And before you know it, we can look up and we find ourselves from 8 o'clock a.m., we're at midnight, and sometimes 1 a.m. in the morning before we get final words surrounding what elections have yielded. But that's kind of what we have morphed into as conference sessions. But I do emphasize that really is not the intention. However, it's real, and you all say we got to be relevant, we got to be resourced, and we got to be real. So I got to be real. What we're looking for, we want to know who the new Pharaoh is going to be in town. We need to know who his cohorts are going to be. and we need to know, is he a friend? I mean, will he be a Pharaoh who don't know the Josephs, in the diverse places, and those kinds of things matter. And basically, a constituency session is for the election of officers. Let me just say it professionally now: for the election of officers, to showcase strategy, to give a financial complexion of the organization, and to basically reaffirm the mission that has taken place and is going to take place.
Wow.
All right.
Wow.
All right. We saw one
that's a
question
lot.
here, Raj, before we move on. The question came from Jennifer Sharon. She asked if we could explain how the union participates in and she says presidents, but let's do it for everybody. How the union participates. I'll put it up on the screen. Explain how the union participates in the presidents of their conference's nominating process, or just the nominating process in general. What role does the union play in that process?
Okay. Let's establish very clearly that for every conference that has a membership meeting or a constituency meeting or a session, the president of that conference is the chairman of the session. There is a segment of every conference session that the union president chairs and is in charge of. While the union president is in charge of, and he actually chairs the election process of the conference. That basically is designed to make sure that integrity will reign, that we won't have fingers and hands within the organization determining what the outcome should be. I think the objective here is to have objective facilitation to
Got
make
it.
sure that it's pure and there is no contamination. And that's not just with local conferences, that's with the union. For example, my election will be coming up in September. And I won't be chairing, I will chair my session. But when it comes to the election process, now I'll be chairing the sharing of all reports. I'll be chairing the financial dissemination and showing our balance sheet and EBITDA margins and how we have fared on a financial frontier and how much depth we have, how much financial growth we've had, and how many souls we've baptized, and that all those types of things I will facilitate in the chairmanship. But then the next higher organization is what we call the division. In our case, the North American division. And the North American division president will chair my election process. I have nothing to do with that. Okay. There could be no foul play, or there should be no foul play. There should be no foul play from the part of the president of the organization. However, and the goal is to make sure that the balloting process is supervised by the next higher organization. In the case of a conference, the balloting process would be supervised by the union. The election process will be supervised by the union and facilitated and chaired by the union, and specifically by the per bylaws. And every conference has different bylaws, but most bylaws pretty much declare that a session election process is chaired by the union president or his designee. Okay, for example, if for some reason I felt it would not be wise for me to chair, I could designate one of my officers or someone within the union to care for the session, which I usually do not do because of the gravity of a session. I make sure that I drop everything and make myself available to be the facilitator, to be the chair, to be the enforcer under God, the enforcer. And I want to emphasize that very clearly because I noticed that in every conference, because people have interests in their own organization doing well, they will sometimes come with bulldozers and trucks and trains to try to run over the process to make sure that no one dictates what happens in their conference. But the way our church is configured, the way we operate as a global church, the next higher organization is responsible for facilitating the election process.
Wow.
All right.
That's a lot. And it's good to know that there's a system in place so that fairness can be ensured. So how about now the members of local congregations? They are elected to be delegates. How do they participate in this constituency session? Can their
Right.
voices really be heard?
Uh,
In the session.
Certainly. The design is to make sure that from the furthest extension of our organization, the voice of every human being gets heard. Now, maybe not individually, because every constituent, every member of a conference cannot be a delegate. But in a representative arrangement of things, we are very confident and hopeful that if fairness reigns at every level of the church, like the local church, where the delegates are actually chosen based on a formula that has been extended by the organization. For example, every set of bylaws pretty much relates to a constituency of a certain size. And basically that constituency and its bylaws will pretty much prescribe how many delegates they will have. And this is voted upon by the executive committee of the conference. So this part has nothing to do with an outsider. This is all intrinsic. This happens within. And it's all designed to make sure that everybody's voice gets heard. So sometimes more volume in terms of members yields more delegates. Fewer members yield lesser delegates. So if there's a large church, a larger church will have more delegates than a smaller church. And proportionately, that just sort of proliferates across the organization. Some have felt that smaller churches need to have the same kind of voice or the same volume of voices as a larger church. Well, obviously, that's not how organizations work. But organizations should be designed where even the smaller situations still have a voice. And that voice that actually evolves as a delegate at a session, the church needs to send somebody who they know will be reflective of and representative of the voices of their context. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say.
But Elder, let me just jump in here. We were told in a previous conversation that the delegates who come to the session, particularly the conference session, are not coming to represent their church, but technically are just coming to represent the conference as a whole. And that kind of left some people thinking, well, then why do I need to come when I'm very more concerned about my local church than technically the conference as a whole? Can you shed some light on that?
I will attempt to, Roger. I think that has gotten said in many circles, that you're not a senator going to Congress that lands on the right side or the left side of the aisle. You come representing the country, or you come representing the conference, and the goings on and the onward and upward of the conference. The reality is, we hope that is the case, but we also hope married to that will be the awareness that we can relate to the overall direction of the conference this way from this area, if you understand what I'm saying. So there is an amalgamation between the global good of the conference, but also how does my local area from whence I hail, fit into the overall good of the conference.
Okay.
My engagement needs to be reflective of where I'm from. In other words, ministry may operate a little differently in Nashville than it may in Mississippi. So if I'm from Mississippi, how does the overall conference strategy get operationalized through Mississippi through Huntsville's, Mississippi's hands and legs and hands and feet? It's a different kind of situation. So when I come as a delegate from Mississippi, I need to be cognizant of the overall strategic plan of the conference, but it needs to be married to the context from whence I hail, so that the overall strategy of the conference can be operationalized or customized to fit where I live as well. Now, maybe it didn't get said right in terms of someone saying, "Oh, you're not a senator. You don't represent your area." Well, your very being, the place you're from, pretty much states that that area must resonate with the overall plan.
Well, as it pertains to the membership involvement in session, which I think was Dr. Henry's question, I'm thinking about some of the other stated reasons for the session. So becoming aware of, familiar with the strategic plan of the conference, understanding the fiscal state of the conference. This is the all of the other goals and the reporting that happens. Some might say, why do I have to be a delegate to have access to that information? Why isn't that kind of information just, I mean, you can put that in a newsletter, you can put that in a video and a report and send that out. Why is it that only delegates then and certain portions of the conference are the only ones who get to come and get that information? Because I think some would say that we're spending all the money for that, when again, you could put that in a video, you could put that in a newsletter, and we could get all of that information. It seems like the real participation of the delegates is to come and to do the voting part. Or is there some sort of a voting that happens on the reporting or the fiscal operations or some of those? Now, some of the other things that I know that we do at sessions is we welcome new companies or new churches into the conference, and there are some votes on that. Could you speak to that at any level?
Yes, I can. And I hope I can speak intelligently, or at least scratch where it itches, because you've covered a lot of geography in your question. But I certainly want to say a lot of what you're asking being operationalized in a responsible way. And I think the burden of your question is, how can every member, every constituent be a beneficiary of what goes on at a session, even if they're not able to attend? A lot of that is contingent upon the quality and the consciousness and the awareness of the chief executive officer or the president. What kind of system does he put in place? Many conferences, I have 8 conferences in my union, for example, and I have 3 universities, and I have a health system with 50 hospitals in it. So it's kind of a large responsibility I have, and a whole lot of opportunity for observation of leadership style. Some presidents are very strong in the area of what we call organizational communication. You know, they know how to create an atmosphere where data gets proliferated. For example, I had the privilege of chairing a nominating committee. Dr. Dion allowed me to escape. He told me to preach Saturday night. Dr. Dion did this to me. Dr. Dion Henry made me get on a flight. He made me leave my hotel room at 3 a.m. and he made me get on a flight at 5 a.m. and fly all the way to Georgia and then drive 2 hours to my location to be there by 9 o'clock to chair a nominating process. And then he told me, you better get back in time. Get on a flight and get back in time.
Dion, you've been exposed, my friend. You've been exposed.
I was punch drunk and I was brain dead, but I managed to do it. But with all of that, Dr. Paul, what I was able to do on Monday morning was to get on my computer and to draft a document surrounding the recommendations of the nominating committee, not just to delegates, but to the constituents. I wanted them to know what happened there. And I'm saying that's just my stylistic approach to leadership. Some presidents, they'll just wait and they say, well, the delegates are handling it, let them handle it. And if it gets out, it gets out. I'm not throwing anybody under the bus because I'm not calling anybody's name. But a lot of what you're asking for in terms of keeping every constituent in the loop, so it won't feel as if there are some representatives that never really touch us or give us perspective as to where we are in the stream of time or in the stream of the organization. I'm very high, personally, on organizational communication. I want to make sure that at every turn, a memo goes out, a video goes out, some type of blast goes out through technology to sort of alert men and women who are constituents of an organization. This is where we're going. This is how it looked. This is what happened. I don't talk about the nature of the discussion, but I can deal with outcomes. Okay, if things get voted, we can say these are the recommendations and yada yada. Now, some feel that for me to do that prematurely can start a forest fire because there's too much opportunity for grass to grow before the ultimate constituency meeting takes place. You see there? That's why I say it differs from bylaws to bylaws because some conferences, let's take Southeastern Conference, for example. Southeastern Conference, their bylaws are written in such a way where the nominating committee and the session and the organizing committee, all of those things take place within a 24-hour period.
Oh, can we talk about that?
It starts on Saturday night. It starts on. So there's very little time to keep constituents in the loop.
Yeah.
Delegates are in the loop, but constituents are not in the loop because of the pressure cooker arrangement of the order of things.
Yeah.
So basically,
I got a question real quick.
I could get my just out. If I can get my little memo out to kind of keep folk in the loop and to let folk know, with the Southern Union session, I like to send out, for example, I want to send out a preview to constituents. I may not send them the agenda, but I certainly will send out something that we all can take a look at because this is where I'm hoping the union will go. These items will be on the floor and on the table for discussion and yada, yada, yada. I'll do that with the constituents, not just the delegates, because I want everyone to feel involved in the process.
So since you brought that up, just to follow up to that, and I know all of us have this right now.
Hold on, I got a question.
Okay, go.
Question. If the members of the conference wanted to change, I'm not in, the Southeastern Conference or conferences that have everything in a 24-hour period. But suppose the members wanted to change that. Suppose the people said, we're tired of meeting on a Saturday night and having the nominating committee, elected on a Saturday night and then meeting Sunday morning. If they wanted to, how do they go about doing it?
That happens through the bylaws. And my recommendation will be one of the standing committees that gets elected at every session is what we call a Constitution and Bylaws Committee. Now, that committee is a standing committee. That committee does its work during the course of a session. And what it does, it massages and restructures and it hones the already existing bylaws, modifies them to accommodate what would be in the best interest of the conference. The place where we would grab this, Dr. Dion, is if someone were to just write a note to the chairman of the Constitution and Bylaws Committee, and within regional conferences, for example, usually is the executive secretary of the conference. That person usually is the chair of the Constitution and Bylaws Committee. And it's at that place where the recommendation is put forth in the bylaws as to the interval of the time, whether it's going to be 4 years or 5 years, whether it's going to be a quadrennium or a quinquennium. Also, another thing that can get looked at is how the actual election process will work. Are we going to do it in 24 hours or will it have to be at least 30 days apart? I mean, something like that, or 2 weeks apart. You know what I mean? But that part gets addressed by the Constitution and Bylaws Committee. How does a member activate that? Simply by submitting an agenda item for consideration. They can do it through their pastor. They can do it directly. A good Constitution and Bylaws chairperson would allow them, if need be, to personally visit the next scheduled Constitution and Bylaws Committee meeting and to make their concern plain, put it in writing, or be there audibly to articulate it. But the place where it gets processed for recommendation purposes to the constituency session, and that's where the bylaws actually get voted at a constituency session. Okay, to make sure that the right stuff gets on the docket for consideration, it filters through the standing committee that is called a Constitution and Bylaws Committee. Again, members can activate that process by submitting a request to the chairperson of the Constitution and Bylaws Committee. And the item will be on the agenda for the Constitution and Bylaws Committee when it meets.
Okay, let's continue to slow walk that then. Just to so that member or pastor or whoever writes that letter to the chairman of that standing committee, Constitution and Bylaws Committee. Constitution and Bylaws Committee chairperson gets the letter. And what if they decide that they do not put that on the agenda for the next Constitution? Well, let's consider two scenarios. Number one is that it just never gets on that agenda. Number two, it gets on the agenda. What happens next? Talk us through. So it gets to the Constitution and Bylaws Committee. Then what happens there from that point to the point where somebody can take action on it?
You have two questions in one. What happens if they get the information or the letter is clear and they choose not to put it on the agenda? Okay, not knowing which conference I'm talking about, I'm absolutely impervious to any conference. So I'm talking.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm same. I'm not talking about any particular conference either. That's just.
If they don't put it on the agenda, that would be a miscarriage of justice. Okay, that would be wrong. That would not be right.
So the chairperson does not have discretion as to what agenda items they provide for the Constitution and Bylaws Committee?
They have discretion in consultation with the person who submits it. But something of that magnitude probably has to get worked through a bylaws committee. And that's the purpose of a committee. So that I, as a chairperson, would not, if it's within the parameters of doability, it's something that can be discussed. So it's really the prerogative of the committee. It's not the prerogative of the chairman exclusively to divest himself from the committee's judgment. The committee may decide this is something they want to deal with.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
So basically, what I'm hearing then is that the local member who sits in the pew, has some responsibility in doing some work or some pre-work to get things acknowledged, even by the Constitution and Bylaws Committee, because that committee is not a secret committee, because that is broadly known throughout the conferences that these are the members of the Constitution and Bylaws Committee. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
I think most of our members have probably never even heard of a Constitution and Bylaws Committee. I would imagine that they.
Well, one of the challenges, Dr. Paul, is members, and I don't want to beat up members because I'm a member. We have a tendency as members sometimes to procrastinate and to feel that the system is broken. We become apathetic, and we just basically give up. We just conclude that because of its brokenness, somebody with a brain one day will get in the lane of fixing it, and they use their intervention usually looks like bemoaning the state of affairs, and they do it on the peanut gallery. They don't do it in an officious way. Right, but I would appeal to constituents to recognize that that's what you are. You are a member. You are a constituent.
So again, another step further, that member writes that letter to the chairman of the Constitution and Bylaws Committee. They find out that item never made the agenda. And then they come to me and say, Pastor, I wrote the letter to the Constitution and Bylaws Committee. I found out it never even got on the agenda. I need you to do something about it. and what's the pastor then if it's supposed to do in that scenario? What's the recourse if it does not?
This is where you and I, as pastors, this is where we earn our money, and we make that's why we make the big checks that we make. Okay, we run interference for the members of the church. We are a shepherd. We run interference for them. In other words, we will communicate to the executive secretary what happened, and if we don't feel that we've gotten a hearing, how do I address this? Is there a way that we can get this heard? And maybe somebody would want to talk to the president about it to see if it's something that needs to go on the executive committee to address the functionality
of the Constitution and Bylaws.
Of the Constitution and Bylaws Committee. This executive committee will say, well, we need to look at that. But see, here's one of the challenges, and we're all guilty. Members are sometimes unclear, if not fearful, about approaching for the fear of looking silly or stupid. Pastors are sometimes afraid to get into the potential political fray of a hot potato issue, so they fail to mention it or to go forward or to carry the ball to the right source, the secretary or the president, sometimes more than once if necessary, for fear that they're going to be punished if they go ahead and do you understand what I'm saying? So then
Sure. Yep.
we've got this we've got this reverberating cycle that kind of feeds into the fear and the trepidation and the apprehension about pushing the envelope further, because we take the time to evaluate the political ramifications of that. But the reality is, members have the right to ask the questions that need to be addressed.
Okay. Dr. Tony Taylor, Pastor Tony Taylor is asking, can members of the bylaws committee suggest or recommend an agenda item to the chairman?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in some cases, that's how a lot of information filters to the right process. Sometimes when we are not, one of the reasons for publishing the members of the executive committee is so we'll know who they are. One of the reasons for publishing the members of the Constitution and Bylaws Committee is so that we might know who they are. And we might have more access to a member of the Bylaws Committee than we do with the chair. Wow. What an opportunity to talk to the member of that committee and ask that member of the committee to bring that to the chairperson.
Wow. Good.
So basically what I'm hearing, I mean, a lot of people tend to say, well, we're a spiritual organization and we behave differently. But being someone who came in from the outside or the non-church world where business is happening. Matter of fact, I worked at Capitol Hill and saw how government operates. Basically, we're saying that some of the same mechanics that is involved in operational committee work is the same thing here in the church, where we as a member have the ability and the right to reach out to committee members and to share our thinking, and hopefully they can then discuss it to see if it fits into the overall conference's agenda. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely, Roger. And I do want to say, gentlemen, please keep this in perspective, because we've got this thing called active, high-level, electric, on steroids politicism. Okay, and at all times, people are running scared on every frontier. They're afraid to put forth their area of concern because it's just pregnant with politicism, because it's a hot potato issue. Sometimes there's this reluctance on the part of administrations or chairmanships of bylaws committees to even hear those things because they seem to be pregnant with politicism. So rather than deal with it, they would rather conclude that this guy is just playing politics. He's trying to bog the process down. Well, the reality is that's a label that we might want to put on any issue that gets presented. But I have a responsibility as a churchman, as an officer, to make sure that when items come to me, I will put them before my committee. Sometime there have been a couple of ridiculous items, as far as I'm concerned, that were brought forth to me as the chairman of the Southern Union Executive Committee. Person came to me, and I just felt it would derail all of our evangelistic prowess because it was a waste of time. It would distract our committee members. That was my reasoning. But I still had a responsibility, as ridiculous as that issue was, to discuss it with my officers. And they advised me, well, Ron, we're going to have to at least mention this at the executive committee. And I did. I said, ladies and gentlemen, an issue was brought to me surrounding this. I didn't feel this should make a full agenda item. And I don't want us to take a lot of time with this. That's my opinion, unless you choose to, because it really doesn't resonate with the direction that we are going. But you will decide as a committee. And they usually will make a decision based on my comments that way. But I still have a responsibility to put it before them. I can't just like not do it because I think it's political.
Good.
Members have a right to put before us stuff that we don't want to hear sometimes. They have a right to recommend directions that we may not want to go. It may encroach upon my comfort zone as a leader. I'm sorry, it just may. But I have a responsibility still.
Okay, so let's just finish this out because so it gets to the committee. Then what? So the item gets before the committee. They find merit in it.
Here's the then what, Dr. Paul.
Okay.
It goes through the committee, it gets discussed, and it becomes a recommendation. It either dies at the committee or I'm not saying that everything that gets recommended to the committee is going to make it to the session. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But the committee may decide this is junk. We're not doing this. We don't feel all in favor, all opposed. It will live or die based on parliamentary procedure. When it gets to a session, survives. The session can adopt it or the session can kill it. There are some recommendations that have come to a constituency session from the Constitution and Bylaws Committee. The Bylaws Committee may have embraced 80% of the report and threw out 20%. So everything that comes as a recommendation at a session doesn't get adopted. Just because it made it to the Constitution and Bylaws Committee is no guarantee that it's going to fly. But that is the process. And it's called a representative government. Because the beauty is the Constitution and Bylaws Committee is just like an executive committee. It's made up of men and women from different parts of the conference. It's not just administrators. It's not just a couple of pastors who are friends. It's not just a couple of lay people who are trying to hijack pastors. It's a constellation following a formula prescribed by the bylaws to make sure that even-handedness reigns, and it may die or live at that table.
And Dr. Smith, the regularity of the meeting of the Constitution bylaws is dependent on the Constitution bylaws itself, or is it just at the whim of the executive or the whim of the president?
It has worked out to where it has followed a tradition. Usually, Constitution and Bylaws committees will, in some conferences, in most conferences, they will start engaging in thorough work in terms of preparing bylaws for the next session, probably about a year and a half out. About a year and a half prior to a session. The Constitution and Bylaws Committee usually goes to work. However, watch this, because y'all got to hear this, because it's a standing committee. Because it's a standing committee, at any point in time, an issue can be brought to the Constitution and Bylaws chair for the purpose of study and processing and hopeful execution. But it cannot affect the goings on within the conference at the time. But it has to be voted by the next session. Because the conference goings on basically are predicated on the last voted bylaws at a session. So what I decide to fix in the bylaws during this period of time is not going to affect me in the here and now. It's only going to impact stuff when it's voted at the next session. You understand what I'm trying to say? And then the next quinquennial period or the quadrennial period would be prompted and governed by the bylaws that we just voted at the session.
Okay, so let me get some clarification on the term "the next." This is like somebody saying next Friday or this Friday. Is it so? So they vote that at a 2022 session. They vote whatever that recommendation was. It is voted on the floor of the constituency meeting. That vote, when does that item become effected? Is that effected immediately upon the vote of the constituency? Does it matter based on how the item is worded in the motion itself or the recommendation itself? Or does that differ from conference to conference based on what's in bylaws?
Okay, and that's almost kind of a chicken and egg question. It does get a little convoluted because basically it is expected that what gets voted, for example, let me say Southeastern session, what will get voted at the Southeastern Conference session, April 24, 2022, will affect and will effect change or governance that will take place after that vote is made. In other words, for the next 4 or 5 years, whatever is voted.
Okay.
Now, some will say, well, does it kick in Sunday night or does it kick in Monday morning? You know, some will say that. And that's trying to deal with the whole chicken and the egg thing. I'm saying for all practical purposes, the first day of business of the new administration obviously will be governed and prompted by the most recently voted bylaws.
Okay.
So Doc, I have a question. I got a question. So, if at the session the people said, and we'll just go back to that prior example of the nominating committee being elected prior than 24 hours before the session. If at the session the people said, I want the nominating committee for the next session to be already voted 30 days before the session, but it's not on the agendas of the revisions from the bylaws committee. But if somebody stood up and said, this is what we want, and the people said yes.
Who people?
The constituents. Now, I've encountered situations like that, Dr. Dion, and what I advise conferences to do is to have a room set aside for the Constitution and Bylaws Committee to go into that room and hammer things out and bring back the recommendation to us before the session actually ends.
Got you.
You follow me?
Yep.
Because we can't construct the bylaw protocols from the floor.
Yeah.
We need to funnel that through the Constitution and Bylaws Committee. So when I plan a session, for example, in the Southern Union, because the Constitution and Bylaws Committee is a standing committee up until the next session, when a new bylaws committee is established, and that becomes a standing committee until the next session, 5 years or 4 years from now. But because we don't want things to just lay out in purgatory like that and never really get dealt with, we deal with those issues in the bylaws committee, but we have a special room that is set aside for the Constitution and Bylaws Committee to reconvene and to convene and to reconvene and convene. And I've seen them come out, present something, and say, no, and they have to go back. And they bring something out that the floor can live with, and that's kind of what gets voted or executed. And sometimes it gets voted up or down, but basically it gets grappled with. The bylaws will come with a recommendation. Look at it this way. Now, for the election process, the nominating committee room will send out a recommendation. I'll walk up on the stage, somebody's giving a report, and they'll stop the report. And I'll say, ladies and gentlemen, we have a partial report from the nominating committee. Everybody's quiet. Everybody's listening. They want to see, what's getting ready to happen? Okay, so then the secretary reads that report. Okay, the committee will say, so okay, let's not applaud yet. I'll say, let's vote. Let's take our clickers. Let's take our ballots. Let's take our signs, whatever our protocol is that we decided on, right? And then it gets voted. Okay, we are voting on that segment of the report. We don't necessarily we don't discuss people's names on the floor, nothing like that. But watch this. This is the point I'm trying to make. We can vote. If we like it, we can vote the report and say, yes, we like the report. Then it's binding. If we don't like it, we send the report back. Well, the same thing happens with the bylaws committee. They come out with the recommendation the floor has been clamoring for. And if we don't like it, we send it back. If we like it, we ratify it.
I'm so sorry, Edith Farr, about that headache.
She's probably speaking for quite a few of us here today. But I have to be honest with you. This just the discussion of this discussion today is opening the eyes to a lot of folks.
Yeah.
I'm just coming through. The town hall experience. South Central Conference did a town hall run. We have one more to go. We went around the conference sharing information about the upcoming set, and quite a few people said we did not know. And so it's as if our membership is oblivious to the process in which we do business. And so, Dr. Smith, help us in kind of sharing maybe some ways in which we can educate our members, or maybe educate our leaders in being more open to sharing with our members the process of how we do business in the Seventh Adventist Church.
Dion, how did we give Roger that question? Because Doc Smith is going to blame it on conference communication directors. Why did he?
Okay. Here's my dream. And I would do it from the union if I could, but I can't because I've got 8 conferences and each of their bylaws are different from a union standpoint. But if I had my dream, I would develop a manual, just a little pamphlet, and I'd entitle it, "So this is your conference. Understand its governance process." That would be the name of the pamphlet. This is your conference. Understand its governance process. And I would recommend, Roger, that the office of secretariat of each conference would develop. So this is your conference. Clarity surrounding its governance process, so that members can read through it and have perspective in terms of the very stuff that you're saying that we don't understand. Because here's the reality. No, I mean, I think our model is really antiquated. I think it's old. It's moth-eaten. It's dinosaur-driven. It's old. It needs to be overhauled. It needs to be looked at. But it needs to be changed organizationally.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So it's not the process I'm trying to say is not a new process. So by now, certainly church officials ought to know it. I know it like the back of my hand. That's why I have to keep my mouth shut sometimes and stop talking so much, because I got so much in my head that's swirling each time you ask a question. But the average member, we're always baptizing. I'm thinking about the 130 people that I baptized in Connecticut, or the 100 people that I baptized in Atlanta, or the 100 and some people I baptized in Florida. These people know nothing about a governance process. They know nothing about that. And that's what you're talking about, Roger. There are a whole lot of members who just have no clue. They don't know. And I think it would be nice to have some type of cheap little pamphlet. I shouldn't call it a cheap pamphlet, but a little pamphlet just to kind of look at and see. This is your conference.
Yeah.
This is how the governance process works. And just put those details in there. And it's not hard to do. It's something that I think if we, and I might recommend that. I believe Jim Davidson has been working on that with some of our conference secretaries. And that will make it a little easier for the average member to understand whether they're chosen as a delegate or not.
Yeah, I'd like to speak right quick to some of the, we're sensing in some of the comments that we're seeing in the chat right now. Somebody said, "This is why we hate, y'all made us hate constituency sessions, and I have a headache, et cetera, et cetera." But I think it is key, because what we as pastors often hear is we feel the frustrations of members when they want to come to us and complain about the systems within the church, the policies, the structures, and we do it too as pastors, right? We'll get the water cooler and we'll fuss and we'll complain and we'll say, "When you want to do this," and we want to go have a meeting with the president. We want to go and talk to the youth director, talk to the campground superintendent, and we want to have these meetings and write these letters and do these letter campaigns and sign all this stuff. But I think in the reality, what we're finding is that a lot of this stuff is governed by the Constitution and bylaws. And so you can talk to your blue in the face, to the president, to the secretary, to the whoever else it is, you can talk. But if it's codified inside of your conference's Constitution and bylaws, there will be zero change until it is voted through the Constitution and bylaws on the floor of a constituency meeting. And so that's why I think this conversation that we've just had, while it may be boring and headachy and all that kind of stuff, if you want change, if we want to move things from where they are to where we want them to be, if it is already codified inside of a constitution and bylaws, it will not change until that constitution and bylaws is changed. If it does not exist and you want it to exist, then get it to the Constitution and Bylaws Committee and get it codified into the process. And I think that's, yeah.
Understand the process. Understand the process. And I think that's what a good pamphlet can do to help. I think that's one of the takeaways that I need to work on with our executive secretary of the union, to implore our executive secretaries or administrations of each conference to put that out. Understand the process, and then recognize that the process does work. It does work.
Well, I know we only have about 4 minutes left. I got to be protective of Dr. Smith's time.
Yes,
yes, sir. Because you have me in bondage, Dr. Dion. You look all calm and neat and serene, but no one knows the trouble that you put me through, sir. Thank you.
Dr. Henry, I just want you to know you will not live this down. 10 years from now, he will remember this moment, and he will let you remember it too.
Right. But I do want to say this to Doc Smith. I mean, my hat really goes off to you, because what you have said today, what you have shared today, you are actually educating our viewership. You're letting them know that they have the power, that they can actually make a difference at these sessions. I mean, and I'll be honest with you. I mean, I haven't heard, someone speak like this, trying to empower the members like this. And I think that our viewers are when they look back at this feed here, they could be happy to know that we do have a union president that wants to put power back into the hands of the people. And then also, I would like to say, evangelism. We talk about the constituency session and we talk about all these things, but at the heartbeat of what you do and of what you try to push to our conferences, our pastors, is public evangelism. It is, let's get out there and win souls for Christ. So I definitely want to thank you so much for coming on.
And if you want me to just start a forest fire on my way out, I just saw a comment across the screen that says, don't worry about changing the process. So don't waste your time explaining the process, just change it. Okay. That probably goes counter to what I'm seeking to say. What I'm trying to say is the process needs to be explained to our constituents. And I believe there's a modality that we agreed upon that we probably can look at. You can put a manual together, and then don't just change it. Understand what we're changing. Let's be intelligent as we work, and let's move together as a united front.
Yeah, because I think what you were saying, Doc, is you cannot change it outside of the process. So in order to change it, right?
What's the purpose of changing it if you don't understand it?
Oh, it sounds like you cannot change it if you don't know the process of changing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good.
All right. This has been truly great. I saw some comments, and as we get ready to close, Doc, just one last thing. One of our viewers, a couple of our viewers, talked about the wording that we use. We use election. We use candidates, but in essence, that's not really the process we have. We don't have candidates. We don't have people who come out and say, I'm running for, or I want to be this. So an election is not necessarily the opportunity. We use words like called, or have been appointed, or have been chosen based on that. The words in biblical sense in terms of throwing lots and things like that. How careful should we be in our wording when it comes to this process, so that we don't send the wrong message?
Okay. I wish you could ask that question a little more simple, Rod. You said it. You gave me a long statement. I know we got to go, but I want to answer that question. Ask me again. Just say it again. So
Basically, some members were saying we talk about candidates, but we talk about elections, but elections have candidates, and we don't really have elections. we kind of talk elections, and they're saying if we have an election, we should have candidates which allow people to choose, know what they're voting on, and we don't have that process. How
Yeah.
careful should we be about utilizing certain terminologies that don't really pertain to the process we actually ascribe to?
Okay, two things we're talking about. I just want to say, and this is one of the things I've noticed about my church that I love. Uh, this is just the way we are. I don't know why we're that way, but this is the way we are. When we find out someone wants a position and they would die for it, we study the science to make sure they don't get it. I don't know whether we're just trying to keep them humble. I don't know. I don't know what it is. But I think it becomes critical for us to understand how the process works. And this is where I want our secretaries to be helpful. I'm going to do the best I can. That's my takeaway from this roundtable. I'm going to get our secretaries together, and we're going to have to put together per bylaw, conference by conference. We can't do a universal one because bylaws differ from conference to conference. But I will say that we might have a template from the union that our conferences can spin off of so that our constituents can understand the process. As it relates to the people that are tied to the election process, we may want to kind of downplay some of that and just kind of let the nominating committee do that rather than make that the dominant feature of who. But I probably would ask us as a constituency to consider thinking more about what. In other words, let's look at what is good for the organization. What are we hoping for?
Yeah.
And then let the nominating committee process the battery of names. That's their job. They have to nominate real people and offer them as recommendations to a constituency. So, Raj, I may not have answered it right, but I think we need to kind of put the emphasis on what and let the nominating committee deal with the who. That may sound very unpopular, but it kind of gets really a major traffic jam and a distraction if we do otherwise.
I know our time is up, but Doc, that is the point that I think is a major source of frustration for a huge segment of our constituency, particularly people who are asked to come as delegates. It has been my experience that whenever it's conference session time and you go around the local church asking, nominating people to be delegates, there's a whole swath of people who seem to be intelligent, know conference names, know people, etc., who, and it's my experience, decline. They don't want to go to conference session because they feel like, at least how it's done in the places where I've been, they feel like the whole process is a farce. They're saying, if I am going to voice my opinion on who should be in these offices and take over leadership, we're not given, and I think this is what the gentleman, Brother Santillo, was mentioning in the chat. If they don't know the qualifications, the history, they don't get a resume. They don't know who these people are. And so they feel like when the nominating committee goes back and they bring out not a slate of names for them to choose, they bring out one name and they vote and they're like, I don't know who that person is. But they also know that there's been some background wrestling on who actually gets in those rooms in the nominating committee, and it feels like it's rigged. And I'm not saying that it is. I'm just saying that that's often the feeling that comes out, and people say, forget it. They're going to do what they want to do. I don't want any part to play in the process because it feels like a farce. And I think there's some who aren't, but I think there's a lot of frustration with people who say, they're just leaving it for the nominating committee. So my role here as a delegate, I'm not really, it feels like a waste of my church's money to send me here or my own personal money to come here if I'm just kind of rubber stamping or co-signing, and there's no intellectual process on my end that really kind of is discerning who I think should be here or a choice between that. And I think that's where a lot of the frustration from a lot of our folk come from.
I certainly embrace and understand that frustration. If I were to leave a final appeal, it would be this. Yes, there are some people who are a little, they're a little apprehensive about the integrity of our process. I get that. But then there are a whole lot of people who participate in the process. So, I mean, for example, there are some conferences, they have too many delegates. And just the idea of trying to scale it back to make fewer delegates because it would be a more reasonably priced session and that type of thing, they don't want to hear of it. They want to keep the delegate count high because they want adequate representation with as many voices as possible. So just as there are those who are somewhat apprehensive about going, there are many who are gun-ho about going. So I would suggest at this point in time, that's just a human phenomenon. I want to pray and I want to appeal to you to ask God to enable us to trust the process and by his power for the process to work.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of our problem is that just people do not trust the process, and whether it's the process or the people, there's a combination of that people don't trust the people and they don't trust the process.
Yes, it's a prayer thing, and my prayer request is that God would enable us, since this is his church and it's not my church. God, please enable me to trust the process that we have, unless there's a better one. Help us to trust the process we have.
And I'm sorry, because we only get one shot at this. I'm going to keep pushing just a little bit.
Yeah.
If they say we're going to trust the process is designed and actuated by people. Now, if we were to say we're going to take some sticks, put them in a box, pray over them, and see which one buds in the morning, they would probably say, fine, we'll trust that process. But that's not what you called us here for. You called us here to cast a vote. You called us here to make a decision based on information that we either have or do not have. And we're casting a vote based on data. And if we don't have data, if we don't have information, if we don't know who these people are, then we neither trust and that's what the process is. We don't trust it. And because they know some of the stuff that we know.
As your guest, finally, let me just put my little final imprimatur as your guest. The process that I'm referencing is the process that is prescribed by our World Church, by our North American Division Church, by our Union Church, by our Conference Church, and by our constellation of churches. That's the agreed upon process that's in our Red Book, that's in our church manual. And for all practical purposes, there might be a better process, but this is not one that has been customizably rigged by a particular conference. This is an agreed upon process by the church. So when I say, Lord, can you please help us to at least work with and trust the process that we have? We understand ultimately it's a condition of the heart. I want to trust God to use the process that he's given us, that we've agreed upon as a church, to do the best we can.
Well, I think to even help even that out even some more, I think, and which a part that we did not get to, is that this denominational process that you referred to allows for different processes and different modalities of sessions to take place. And I think that we would have, if we had time, we would have loved for you to share, because you've gone from session to session, conference to conference, and you've seen there are some different ways in which these things go out. So it's not just one standard process that is
fundamentally it is. Fundamentally, it is a standard process. There are variations per bylaws. For example, when you have your nominating committee, when you don't. But the point is, there is a template that we pivot off of from conference to conference. They all virtually look alike, but there are some peculiarities that are sort of germane to the local jurisdictions that are being cared for at the time. And I'm suggesting to you that whatever the process is that our church has agreed upon, let's just work that process and trust it by God's grace. And because there's nothing else we can do other than trust God. To use God's church, I believe it includes the processes. God's church, as weak and feeble as it might appear to be, it is still the supreme object of his regard. God cares about the process. He cares about his church. And I want to trust him to help work our process to get the best outcome.
Right. I gotta jump in here and say also, it's not just trusting the process. I think we have to get involved in the process as a church. And we should not wait till a year before session to say, hey, what's going on? We need to start now, looking ahead, looking for our grandchildren, looking for our great-grands, getting an opportunity to begin to get in there, because this is God's church, but it's our church.
Yes.
And we can't be waiting to the last minute and then get frustrated because we didn't really do our homework. And that's my last word on it. And our time is gone. Dr. Smith, thank you so much.
Raj, I want to say this.
Yes.
I want to say this, Raj. So I think that we should understand the current process, right? Let's understand the current process. Let's understand how things go. And then if changes, which I think that there's some changes that we can make to the process, let's try to make those changes. I disagree with just throwing away what we have and just, no, let's understand what we have. Let's understand it. And then let's try to change it so that it can be better if there's some ideas to make it better. So, and the last thing I would say, with our church, there's a lot of things we could say about our church. Our church is missing this, our church is, missing that. And I get it. We need to look at the structure, the organization, and see, what makes sense. What we have now, does it make sense, right now? Did it just make sense yesterday? Do we need to change that? We need to look at all of that. But let's understand it. Let's understand it. And then now we can suggest change.
There's a process that Dr. Smith is getting ready to go and share with some people about, the process of how you get saved, how you get the blood of the Lamb poured over you, washed in the fountain. And Doc, we are so grateful that you took the time out to spend with us. Before you do that, we are grateful for how God is using you there in Altamont Springs these past few weeks. And we want to pray over you before we let you go, that God will just use you in helping people to understand and love and fall in love with the process of how salvation works. And so to Pastor Henry, we were getting you to pray earlier. We know that he is your guest, so we're going to ask you if you just pray, and we're going to invite our audience to join us in this prayer over Dr. Smith as he stands in the Word tonight. And how much longer do you guys have? Is this the last weekend, or you have more?
Oh no, we're going until the date of the weekend of the Southeastern session.
Okay. All right. Well, we just want to invite our audience to join with us as we cover Dr. Smith with this prayer. Dr. Henry.
Right. Let's pray. Father, Lord, what a good conversation about our church, about constituency sessions. And Father, I ask God that you would just continue to lead us so that we might be able to make this process even more effective as we go forward. And then, Lord, Dr. Ron Smith, God, you have blessed him. Lord, we appreciate his commitment to public evangelism.
Yes.
And I ask, God, that you will continue to empower him daily so that he can continue to do the work that you called him to do, especially right here at Altamont Springs for this season. Forgive us for all of our sins, God, and thank you again for being a God that's still in control of your church. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. Again, thank you to our viewers who were sharing. Please make sure you support Pastors Roundtable. Go to the support page on our website, prt.live. We are just so excited that you were here with us, Dr. Smith, and to our viewers for joining us, where we here at Pastors Roundtable strive to make ministry relevant,
resourced,
and real. God bless.
Take care, everybody.